On my birthday, my billionaire grandpa smirked and asked, "Is the apartment comfortable?" I shockingly froze, because behind that smirk was the cruelest betrayal I never expected from family. Stay with me as I share how everything unfolded, and if my story speaks to you, remember to hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and share it with others. It truly helps more than you know. My name is Evelyn, and I turned 24 this year. I grew up without my parents. They passed away in a car accident when I was just a child, and for a long time, I thought my grandfather Michael was the only person in the world who truly cared about me. He was larger than life, sharp suits, big boardrooms, always on the news as one of the wealthiest men in the country. To me, though, he was simply Grandpa. When I was younger, he seemed kind. He would pat my head, buy me ice cream, and tell me stories about how strong I needed to be because life wouldn't be easy. I believed him. I trusted him. And when I turned 21, he told me he wanted to give me a fresh start. He handed me the keys to a modest apartment in the city. He said, "Evelyn, this is my gift to you. Live here, study, and chase your dreams." I cried that night, believing I was loved. But standing in front of him on my birthday, hearing his smirk-laced question about the apartment, something inside me twisted. The way he said it, it wasn't kindness. It was mockery. Almost like he knew something I didn't, like the gift I had cherished wasn't really mine at all. His words replayed in my head as the room fell silent and my relatives chuckled under their breath. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the apartment wasn't the blessing I thought it was. Memories of the past 3 years came flooding back. The leaky ceiling I had to fix on my own. The rent bills that kept coming in my name, even though Grandpa had promised it was mine. The way my uncle once joked, "Better stay on Grandpa's good side, or you'll be back on the streets." At the time, I brushed it off. Now it all made sense. My life had been full of struggles. I worked part-time jobs to cover expenses that shouldn't have existed if the apartment were truly a gift. I skipped meals to save money, studied late nights, and convinced myself Grandpa wanted me to learn responsibility. But deep down, I always wondered why my cousins lived in luxury while I was counting coins for groceries. On that birthday, with everyone watching me and Grandpa's smirk burning into my chest, I realized something terrifying. The apartment wasn't generosity. It was a chain disguised as a gift. A way to keep me dependent, grateful, and silent. And that was the moment the betrayal began to show its real face. The birthday dinner should have been warm and full of love, but instead it felt like I had walked into enemy territory. My grandfather's mansion was buzzing with chatter and the clinking of expensive wine glasses, but none of it felt like it belonged to me. Every face around the table carried a smirk or a glance that reminded me I wasn't one of them. Uncle Richard sat at the head of the table, right next to Grandpa Michael. He had that sharp, calculating look in his eyes that never softened, not even for family. Richard was the kind of man who saw everyone as either an asset or a liability, and I knew very well which category I fell into. His voice carried the weight of command, like he was already practicing to take over Grandpa's empire. Aunt Diane was there too, sipping wine with her usual air of superiority. She had a smile that could cut deeper than any insult. Diane always carried herself like she was the crown jewel of the family, forever competing for Grandpa's approval. If Richard represented greed, Diane embodied pride. And then there was Tyler, Diane's son and my cousin. He was my age, but you'd think he was a prince born into royalty. Spoiled didn't even begin to cover it. He wore a brand new designer jacket and bragged about the sports car he had crashed and replaced like it was no big deal. He didn't even glance at me when he spoke, as though I didn't deserve his attention. I tried to sit quietly, to blend in, but it didn't matter. Every word, every laugh felt like it carried a hidden jab. At one point, Richard leaned over to Diane and said, just loud enough for me to hear, "Some people should be grateful they even get a seat at this table." Diane chuckled softly and glanced at me, her eyes glinting with cruel amusement. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to smile. I had learned long ago not to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Still, it hurt, every reminder that I was only here because of my grandfather, not because I belonged. Dinner dragged on with small talk about business deals, luxury vacations, and Tyler's upcoming plans. No one asked about me, about my studies, or my life. I was invisible until Grandpa cleared his throat and looked directly at me. That smirk again. That same smirk from earlier. "So, Evelyn," he said, his voice echoing in the silence that fell across the table. "Is the apartment comfortable?" For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The words hung in the air, heavy with hidden meaning. Richard's lips curled into a satisfied grin. Diane smirked into her glass. Tyler snorted, barely trying to hold back laughter. I swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, Grandpa," I whispered, trying to sound grateful, though my throat tightened with every word. The table erupted in chuckles, as if they had all been waiting for that moment. To them, it wasn't a kind question. It was a reminder that I wasn't an heir. I was just a charity case, living in a small apartment while they lived in mansions and drove cars worth more than I'd earn in a year. I stared down at my plate, my vision blurring. For years, I had convinced myself that Grandpa cared, that his gift of the apartment meant I was loved, protected. But that night, I saw the truth in everyone's eyes. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as an outsider. Worse, they saw me as a burden. My chest ached with humiliation, but I forced myself to sit tall. I didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't run. I simply endured, burning every cruel laugh and dismissive look into my memory. Because deep down, something was changing in me. That night, for the first time, I realized the cruel reality. I wasn't supported by them. I was mocked. And that hurt far more than I was ready to admit. The laughter from that dinner haunted me for days. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their smirks, heard their chuckles, and replayed Grandpa's words like a cruel echo in my head. "Is the apartment comfortable?" It didn't feel like a question anymore. It felt like a threat, a reminder that I lived at their mercy. I couldn't let it go. Something inside me pushed me to find answers. For years, I had accepted the apartment as a gift, believing it was mine. But now doubt gnawed at me. One evening, after another long shift at work, I sat at my small kitchen table and pulled out every piece of paper I had about the apartment. Lease agreements, maintenance bills, tax forms. There was too much fine print, too many things I had signed without fully understanding. I decided to dig deeper. I went to the city records office the next morning. The clerk behind the desk pulled up the ownership information, printed a few pages, and handed them over. My stomach dropped as I read the words, "Property of the Michael Hale Family Trust." Not Evelyn. Not me. The place I called my home was technically controlled by the trust. And who was listed as the trustee? Uncle Richard. My chest tightened as the realization hit. I had never owned the apartment. I was just living there because they allowed it. At any moment, Richard, or anyone Grandpa decided to favor, could sign a piece of paper and throw me out. I walked home in a daze, the documents clutched in my hands. When I got back, I spread them out across the kitchen table, studying every line. That's when I noticed something else, a breakdown of trust allocations. Tyler, my spoiled cousin, had millions set aside for him. Diane had her own trust, filled with properties, investments, and cash reserves. Even Richard's children, still in middle school, had more money secured for them than I could dream of. And me? Just the apartment. Not even ownership. Just a place to live, controlled by the same family that laughed at me. I felt sick. My whole life I had believed Grandpa's act, that he had given me a gift to help me start my future. But now I saw the truth. It wasn't a gift at all. It was a leash. A way to keep me close, but never let me stand on my own. He hadn't wanted me to be equal. He had wanted me to stay grateful, silent, and powerless. I remembered every bill I had struggled to pay, every repair I had covered out of my own pocket. They let me believe I was independent, while in reality, they had set me up to fail, to live under constant control. Tears blurred the words on the page as my chest burned with anger. My father, Michael's disowned son, had been erased from the family, and now I saw that I was being punished too. My cousins lived in luxury, and I was given scraps. That night, I sat in the dark, staring at the documents spread before me. My whole life felt like a cruel joke, carefully orchestrated by the man I thought loved me. I wasn't just overlooked. I was deliberately kept small, kept dependent, so I would never dare to claim what was mine. For the first time, I didn't just feel hurt, I felt betrayed. And betrayal had a way of hardening into something stronger. Something I didn't yet have the words for, but I knew it was growing inside me. I couldn't carry the weight of what I had discovered any longer. The papers from the trust, the proof that my so-called apartment was nothing more than a leash. They burned inside me like a secret I could barely contain. I knew I had to hear it from him directly. So one evening, I asked Grandpa if I could speak to him alone. He agreed, leading me into his study, a room that smelled of old leather and expensive cigars, a place where countless business deals had been sealed. I stood in front of his massive desk, my hands trembling slightly as I held the documents. Grandpa, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. Why didn't you tell me the apartment wasn't mine? Why make me believe it was a gift when it's owned by the trust? He didn't look surprised. In fact, he leaned back in his chair and smirked, that same cruel twist of his lips I had come to dread. Evelyn, he said slowly, as though explaining something to a child, you should be thankful. That's more than your father ever got. The words hit me like a slap. My father, the man I barely remembered, the man whose name had been scrubbed from family conversations, was being used against me. My chest tightened, my throat ached, but I forced myself not to cry. He watched me with cold amusement, like my pain was entertainment. Is that what this is about? I whispered. Punishing me for his mistakes? Making sure I never have what my cousins do. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The smirk was enough. I walked out of the study feeling like my legs might give way beneath me. My grandfather, the man I once saw as my protector, had confirmed what I feared most. I wasn't family. I was a reminder of the son he had cast out, and he would never let me forget it. Over the next few days, the whispers started. At dinner, I caught my Aunt Diane's sharp laugh when I entered the room. Richard leaned close to her and said, "The charity granddaughter should really learn her place." Tyler, grinning, added, "Maybe we should start a donation jar for her rent." Their laughter rang in my ears long after the meal was over. Every corner of that house felt colder, every word sharper. I became a target, a punchline, and the cruelest part was that Grandpa never stopped them. He sat there, letting them humiliate me, his smirk silently approving. I stopped eating with them after that. I took my meals in silence, hiding in my room, but even behind closed doors I could hear the mocking voices. She should be grateful. She's lucky we let her stay. She's just a shadow of her father. Each word carved deeper into me, but I refused to let them see me break. I would not give them my tears. Every night, I stared at the ceiling of that little apartment I once thought was home, now knowing it was a cage. My hands curled into fists, my jaw tightened, and I felt something new stirring inside me. It was no longer just sadness. It was anger, hot, sharp, and unrelenting. They thought I was powerless, that I would always bow my head and whisper thank you. But with every insult, with every cruel laugh, that anger grew stronger. I made a silent promise to myself then. I would endure their mockery, their cruelty, their smirks. But I would not stay broken. One day, I would make them see me, not as their charity case, but as the storm they never expected. The weight of everything I had discovered was crushing me. The laughter, the whispers, Grandpa's cruel words, they replayed in my head over and over until I felt like I might explode. One night, I called my best friend Lauren. She was the only person who had been with me through every hardship, the only one who knew how much I had fought just to survive. When she picked up, I didn't even try to hide my tears. "Lauren, I can't take it anymore," I whispered, my voice breaking. "They treat me like I'm nothing. Even Grandpa, he used my dad's memory to humiliate me." Lauren didn't let me wallow for long. "Evelyn, listen to me," she said firmly. "You are not nothing. They want you to believe that so you stay quiet. But you're stronger than they think. You can't give up now." Her words were a lifeline. She reminded me of all the times I had picked myself up when life tried to knock me down. "You've survived worse," she said. "You'll get through this. And maybe you'll come out stronger than all of them." The call gave me comfort, but fate had another twist waiting for me. A few days later, I was leaving Grandpa's study after another tense dinner when a man stopped me in the hallway. Daniel. He had been Michael's personal assistant for decades, quiet, discreet, always in the background. I had barely spoken to him beyond polite greetings, but now he looked at me with something close to pity. "Evelyn," he said softly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "I knew your father." I froze. Hardly anyone spoke about my dad, and when they did, it was always in harsh tones. You knew him?" I asked. Daniel nodded. "I admired him. He was brilliant, more than most people give him credit for. And I need you to understand something. Your father wasn't cut out because he was weak. He was cut out because he threatened the empire Michael was building." His words sent a chill through me. "What do you mean?" Daniel hesitated, then leaned closer. "There are things you don't know. Michael's will. His businesses. Deals made in the shadows. And your father. He had ideas, inventions, strategies that helped lay the foundation of all this wealth. But instead of credit, he was erased. Michael took what your father built and claimed it as his own." My heart pounded so hard I thought I might collapse. For years, I had believed my father was the black sheep, the mistake Grandpa had been ashamed of. But Daniel's voice was steady, his eyes sincere. "Your father was brilliant," he said again. "And it killed him to see his work stolen, his place in this family ripped away. You deserve to know the truth." After he left, I sat in the dark hallway, shaking. The puzzle pieces that had never fit together suddenly started to form a picture. The trust, the smirks, the cruel reminders that I was lucky to have even an apartment. It wasn't just about me being unwanted. It was about my father's legacy being stolen. The betrayal ran deeper than I had ever imagined. Grandpa hadn't just cut my father out. He had built his empire on my father's back, stolen his brilliance, and then buried his memory so no one would question it. Tears stung my eyes, but this time they weren't from sadness alone. They were from rage. My father's name had been dragged through the mud, his legacy erased, and I was paying the price for it. For the first time, I didn't just want to survive. I wanted justice. And I knew then, I would not stop until I uncovered every secret this family had tried so hard to bury. The invitation to another family gathering arrived in my mailbox like a cruel joke. I considered ignoring it, but something inside me told me to go. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the stubborn refusal to let them see me as afraid. Either way, I dressed as best I could, an old but neat dress, and took the train to the mansion, my stomach twisting the entire way. The house was glittering as usual, lights spilling from the tall windows, the sound of laughter echoing across the driveway. Inside, everything smelled of roasted meats and expensive wine. Everyone was there: Uncle Richard with his sharp eyes, Aunt Diane with her smug smile, Tyler lounging carelessly on a velvet chair like the world belonged to him. As soon as I walked in, I felt the weight of their stares. No one said hello. No one hugged me. I was a ghost in my own family. The evening dragged on until the moment that broke me. Tyler, with a glass of champagne in his hand, stood in the center of the room, boasting about his new sports car. "Custom interior, top speed over 200, all thanks to Grandpa," he bragged, flashing a grin. "Cost more than most people's homes." Laughter erupted. My face burned. I thought about the bills piled on my kitchen counter, the groceries I had skipped last week just to pay for utilities. I thought about my tiny apartment, the one they mocked as a gift. My chest tightened with rage. I couldn't stay quiet this time. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. "Do you have any idea how insulting that is? You waste money like it's nothing, while some of us are barely scraping by. Maybe Grandpa should think about fairness instead of feeding your ego." The room went silent for a moment. I felt every pair of eyes turn on me. Then Diane's laughter cut through the air like a knife. She set down her wine glass, her eyes flashing with mockery. "Oh, Evelyn," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You should be grateful for that apartment. Don't bite the hand that feeds you." Her words echoed in the room, cruel and sharp, and the others chuckled along with her. I felt the blood drain from my face, my hands trembling at my sides. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to run, but I didn't. Not this time. I stood there, my face calm, even as my heart shattered. I saw Grandpa watching from his chair, his lips curled into that same familiar smirk. No defense, no comfort, not even a word in my favor. Just satisfaction at my humiliation. That was the breaking point. In that moment, I realized nothing I did, no obedience, no gratitude, no silence, would ever change the way they saw me. To them, I was the charity granddaughter, the reminder of the son they erased, the girl who should keep her head down and whisper, "Thank you," for scraps. But something inside me shifted. I didn't feel weak anymore. I didn't feel like crying. Instead, I felt my anger harden into something sharp and steady. I looked around the room at their smug faces, at their laughter, at their careless luxury built on lies. And I made a promise to myself right then and there. I would not beg. I would not break. If they wanted me to stay silent, I would do the opposite. If they thought I was powerless, I would prove them wrong. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about my father's stolen legacy, about every sneer and insult I had swallowed, about every smirk that cut deeper than a knife. That night, as I walked out of the mansion, I didn't feel defeated. I felt something I hadn't in years. I felt ready. It was time for revenge. Evelyn had reached her breaking point, but instead of wallowing in humiliation, she allowed her pain to harden into resolve. Every word Diane had thrown at her, every sneer Michael had delivered, every laugh from her so-called family members echoed in her mind like fuel for the fire. She wouldn't stay the quiet, pitiful charity granddaughter anymore. They wanted to crush her spirit. Instead, they had created a weapon. Daniel, her only ally in this war, sat across from her at her small kitchen table, a laptop open between them. His eyes were sharp, his tone steady. If we're going to do this, we have to be smart. Michael has enemies, but he's always managed to bury his dirt. We need undeniable proof. Evelyn nodded, fingers clenched around her tea mug. Then we'll dig until he has nowhere left to hide. Over the next weeks, Evelyn learned just how deep Michael's corruption ran. With Daniel's access to financial records and his careful hacking into company files, they began piecing together a trail of deceit. It started with transfers. Huge sums of money quietly disappearing from one account, reappearing in offshore havens. Then came the falsified reports, numbers adjusted so investors would never notice. But the worst was still ahead. One night, Evelyn scrolled through scanned documents Daniel had uncovered. Her heart stopped as she read Michael's handwriting, unmistakable and arrogant, across a falsified amendment to her grandfather's will. The date didn't line up. The signature had been altered. Michael had tampered with the very document that decided her fate. She felt her hands tremble, fury making her vision blur. He stole from me. He stole from all of us. Grandpa never wanted this. He never wanted them to treat me like dirt. Daniel leaned closer, jaw tight. If this goes public, Michael's empire collapses. Embezzlement, fraud, forgery. He could face prison time. For a long moment, Evelyn just stared at the damning words on the screen. Justice was within reach. She could march into the authorities' office, drop this pile of evidence, and watch Michael's downfall unfold in court. But strangely, it didn't feel enough. No, he had laughed at her pain. He had humiliated her in front of everyone. He had weaponized her father's memory against her. Prison was too clean, too distant. Michael deserved something sharper, betrayal. The same kind he had served her, but laced with poison he would never see coming. Evelyn's lips curved into a cold smile. We won't give this to the police. Not yet. Daniel frowned, surprised. Then what do you want to do with it? She leaned back, her voice steady, each word slicing like glass. I'm going to make him taste what it feels like to be betrayed by your own blood. I'll use his empire against him. I'll let him think he's untouchable, then tear the ground from under his feet. Daniel hesitated, but finally nodded. If anyone deserves it, it's him. Just promise me you won't lose yourself in this. Her eyes burned, not with tears, but with the fire of determination. I already lost myself when they treated me like nothing. Now I'm taking myself back. That night, Evelyn locked the files in a hidden drive and pressed her hand against the cool surface. This wasn't just evidence anymore. It was her weapon, her inheritance in a twisted sense. Michael had taken everything from her father, from her. But now she had the power to destroy him, not as some distant enemy, but as the granddaughter he thought was weak. She whispered into the silence of her tiny apartment. You smirked at me, Michael. You called me a charity case. But soon you'll choke on your own lies. The war had begun. Evelyn had always been underestimated, and she learned early on that when people thought you were weak, they spoke too freely. That was exactly what she needed now. After nights of sleepless planning, she decided the only way to dismantle Michael's fortress was to play the very role he had cast her in, the obedient, grateful granddaughter. If Michael believed she was humbled and submissive, he would lower his guard, and that was when she could strike. So she changed her approach. Instead of meeting his smirk with cold silence, she forced herself to smile sweetly whenever he spoke. She thanked him for all his generosity, and even complimented the apartment he had smugly asked about on her birthday. She swallowed her pride, acting like a dutiful granddaughter desperate for acceptance. And Michael, arrogant as he was, drank it in. You see, Tyler, Michael told her cousin one evening, Evelyn has finally learned where her place is. Evelyn lowered her head, hiding the fire in her eyes, and murmured, Yes, Grandpa. I'm grateful. Behind the curtain of compliance, her plan was unfolding. Daniel, her quiet but steadfast ally, had already helped her piece together financial inconsistencies that pointed to offshore accounts. But those files weren't enough. Evelyn knew she needed more than documents. She needed a smoking gun, something so damning it couldn't be swept under the rug. That was where Tyler came in. Unlike Michael, Tyler was careless. Spoiled by the wealth funneled his way, he loved to brag after a few drinks. Evelyn began spending time with him, casual lunches, late-night calls, even accompanying him to high-end clubs. She pretended to admire his ambition, to laugh at his crude jokes, to nod when he boasted about how much Grandpa trusted him. One night, after too many glasses of whiskey, Tyler leaned in and whispered, You know, Grandpa has money hidden where no one can touch it. Not the IRS, not the family, nobody. It's genius, really. Evelyn tilted her head innocently. Hidden? Like offshore. Tyler grinned, smug and oblivious. Exactly. Multiple accounts, shell companies, fake charities. I've even seen the wire transfers myself. I help cover for him sometimes. Her heart raced, but her face stayed calm. She placed her hand on his arm and whispered, "You must be so important to him. He trusts you so much." That was all it took. Tyler, drunk on both alcohol and flattery, spilled details that Evelyn carefully recorded on her phone. Names of companies, locations of accounts, amounts transferred. The final puzzle pieces slid into place. Now she had everything: the embezzlement records, the forged will sections, and Tyler's drunken confessions. Michael thought he was untouchable, that his wealth and power shielded him from consequence. But Evelyn knew better. She wasn't going to let this rot in some courtroom for years. No, her revenge had to cut deeper. She wanted him humiliated, betrayed by the very family he had manipulated and controlled. She wanted him to feel the sting of trust shattered, the way he had made her feel when he flaunted his power over her. So Evelyn planned the stage. The upcoming family gathering, a lavish dinner Michael himself was hosting, would be the perfect moment. All the relatives who praised him, envied him, or feared him would be there. The wine glasses would clink, the chandeliers would sparkle, and in the middle of it all, Evelyn would flip his empire upside down. She imagined the look on Michael's face when she revealed the truth, the murmurs that would ripple across the dining hall, the silence that would follow his downfall. And when he looked at her, betrayed and stunned, she would smile, not with gratitude, but with the cold satisfaction of a granddaughter who had learned betrayal from the master himself and delivered it right back. The trap was set. Now it was just a matter of time. The next year came faster than Evelyn expected, but she had spent every day preparing for it. She had kept her head down, smiling when Michael smiled, thanking him whenever he made a snide comment about her comfort. To him, she seemed harmless, just a grateful granddaughter trying to fit into his world. That illusion was her shield, and now, finally, it was time to pierce it. Her birthday fell on a Saturday, and Michael insisted on hosting a grand dinner at his mansion. The long oak dining table gleamed under the chandelier, and every family member was present. Uncle Richard with his arrogant smirk, Aunt Diane dripping in diamonds, Cousin Tyler playing the role of golden boy. Evelyn walked in with quiet confidence, a folder tucked inside her sleek handbag. The evening began with Michael holding court, as always. He told stories of his hard-earned empire, sprinkling in little insults aimed at Evelyn, disguised as jokes. The others laughed along, eager to stay on his good side. Evelyn let it roll off her back, sipping her wine, her heartbeat steady. She had rehearsed this moment too many times to let nerves ruin it. Finally, dessert was served, an extravagant cake brought in by staff. Michael raised his glass and stood, his smile sharp as a blade. "Well," he said, his voice booming. "Another year older, Evelyn. Tell me, how's the apartment? Comfortable enough for you?" The table chuckled, as if on cue. Evelyn set down her fork, folded her hands neatly, and lifted her gaze to meet his. For the first time, she mirrored his smirk. "Yes, Grandpa," she said smoothly. "Quite comfortable. But I wonder, how comfortable would prison be for you?" The laughter died instantly. Forks clinked onto plates. Michael's face froze, confusion flickering before it hardened into annoyance. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Evelyn reached into her bag and pulled out the folder. She slid it across the table, the papers fanning out like cards in a winning hand. "These," she said evenly, "are records of embezzlement, forged signatures, and offshore accounts. All tied back to you. You robbed my father of his rightful inheritance, lied to this family, and built your empire on fraud." Gasps broke out around the table. Aunt Diane's hands flew to her pearls. Uncle Richard's glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. Evelyn continued, her voice calm, cutting through the stunned silence. "And it doesn't stop there," she said, flipping to another set of documents. "Richard, these show how you siphoned funds from the trusts meant for charity. And Diane, your business trips? They were covers for laundering money. You all thought I was weak, silent, grateful. But I've been watching." Michael lunged for the papers, his face red with fury. Evelyn pulled them back before he could touch them. "Careful," she warned softly. "Copies are already with my lawyer. Try to destroy these, and I'll make sure the authorities get the rest." The room felt heavy, the air tight. Tyler shifted uncomfortably, realizing his whispered confessions had helped build this case. No one spoke. Evelyn stood, her chair scraping against the polished floor. "You always wanted me to play the obedient granddaughter," she said, her voice steady. "Tonight, I finally did, by giving you a taste of your own cruelty. You asked if I was comfortable? Well, Grandpa, I've never been more comfortable than I am right now." Michael's mouth opened, but no words came out. His empire, the illusion of power he had lorded over them, was cracking piece by piece. And Evelyn, the girl he underestimated, was the one wielding the hammer. The dining hall, once filled with laughter and the smug confidence of the wealthy, now echoed with raised voices, threats, and the sound of a dynasty collapsing under its own weight. Michael's face was red with fury, veins bulging at his temple as he slammed his fist against the long mahogany table. "You dare humiliate me on my own turf?" he spat, his voice shaking with rage. "Do you think a pile of papers and your smug little grin can undo decades of power?" But Evelyn didn't flinch. She remained seated calm, her eyes steady on him. The evidence she had revealed, documents tracing back stolen fortunes, fake trusts, fraudulent property transfers, was undeniable. The law was already watching. His empire wasn't untouchable anymore. The relatives who once laughed at her expense turned on each other like wolves. Uncle Richard jabbed a finger at Aunt Diane, his voice trembling. "This was your idea. Your account numbers are all over those transactions. Don't you dare pin this on me." Diane's painted face blanched. "Don't you dare, Richard. I told you we'd get caught someday. It was you who convinced Michael to use offshore accounts." Their argument rose, voices overlapping, accusations flying, the mask of refinement peeling away to reveal raw, ugly greed. The legacy Michael had prided himself on was nothing but ashes, and Evelyn stood as the match that lit it. Michael tried to shout over them, but his voice cracked. His hand clutched his chest for a moment, the toll of stress showing. He sank into his chair, trembling, fury burning in his eyes but power slipping through his fingers. No one rushed to his side. Not even his children. They were too busy saving themselves. Evelyn quietly gathered her documents, sliding them neatly back into her folder. She hadn't raised her voice once. She hadn't cried. She hadn't begged. The truth had been enough. As she stood, her chair scraping against the polished floor, all eyes darted toward her. Michael rasped, his voice hoarse. "You'll regret this. You think you've won, but you'll see. This family doesn't forgive betrayal." Evelyn's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Betrayal? No, Grandpa. What I did was justice." She walked to the grand double doors, the marble floors gleaming under her heels. Behind her, the family's empire crumbled, not with fire, but with greed tearing them apart from within. Lawyers would swarm. Investigations would follow. Their fortune would be devoured by courts and vultures. And Evelyn? She wanted none of it. She had seen what money, lies, and manipulation did to people. She wouldn't let it chain her. At the door she paused, her back still to them. Her voice was soft, but it carried across the room with the weight of finality. "Yes, Grandpa," she whispered. "The apartment is comfortable. But freedom is even better." She stepped into the sunlight, leaving the mansion behind, its walls heavy with secrets and decay. The air outside was cool, crisp, full of promise. She wasn't walking away defeated. She was walking away reborn. For the first time in years, Evelyn smiled. Not the polite smile she wore to survive, not the forced one to hide pain, but a real smile. She had no empire, no billions, no sprawling estates. But she had something far greater. Herself. And that was enough. Do you think Evelyn made the right choice by walking away from her grandfather's toxic empire? Or should she have stayed and fought for her share of the fortune? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one.